This building behind me is featured in both The Crown and Captain America: The Last Avenger when they were filming New York scenes here. Did you know that Manchester looks like New York and is often used by filmmakers? It got me wondering too when I found out. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to walk around some of the more famous and most used spots of New York, Manchester, and we're going to go into why Manchester may look like New York. So come with me as I take you on a tour of Manhattan. Yeah, I know, just come with me. So we're starting our walk today here on Peter Street in Manchester. I think it's fair to say that the northern quarter is probably the most New York part of the city. However, I'm starting here today because Netflix's The Crown is actually my favourite example of Manchester being used as New York. In the episode I'm talking about Diana makes a visit to New York, and the first moment you see her step foot onto the streets is actually filmed here on Peter Street. And what you see when she walks out of the limousine, you can see the corner of Albert Square and then buildings there just by Rudy's Pizza. And if you look carefully, you can see the facade on the left of what was once the Free Trade Hall, now just outside Peter Street Kitchen. So if you stand here and look around, it's pretty clear that this is the spot where the limousine was parked. So now showing you this bit, we'll head off now to the northern quarter part of the city. I just want to show you something here. I'm just walking up to the northern quarter now on Newton Street, and I noticed this, there's a pub called the Head of Steam and a place next door to it called Cottonopolis. Yeah, so you see that? Head of Steam and Cottonopolis. Easy for me to say. Just a throwback to obviously the glory days of Manchester during the Industrial Revolution. Anyway, get back on track. Walking into the northern quarter reminds me of the first time I realised Manchester used to get used, well it does get used, as a double for New York City. I remember coming in here for a coffee, and when I got here a lot of the cafes were shut, some of the businesses were open, but there were signs everywhere telling us that there was filming going on. I asked the guy next to me what was going on, and he just said to me, like matter of factly, that oh yeah, they're filming New York here again. And so it was the first time really it occurred to me that these two cities had any links whatsoever. Now I can't remember exactly where I was going that day or if that cafe was still open, but I imagine it was somewhere around here, like Stephenson Square, which is a good place if you want to get an independent coffee or a bite to eat. So when Netflix were in town, what they did, they added some extra graffiti, some fire hydrants. They made this place look like a grittier part of New York, while Diana was driven through here on a tour of the back streets of New York. And for me, it's when I get to the back streets of the northern quarter that I really have that New York sense of the city. And The Crown didn't really need to change much when it was filming here on back Piccadilly. You saw Diana being driven around again around more parts of New York, and then you saw someone playing basketball. I think this is the car park that was filmed in, although there's a lot of building work going on today, and so it looks a lot different. So you can see over there, I think that's where she comes around, and then they turn right up there, up to Dale Street, which is where we're heading to next. And now we're on Dale Street, and when Diana's driven down this stretch of road, they digitally imposed the World Trade Center in the distance. And when we get to this building over here, in The Crown, that's the Henry Street settlement. Then for Captain America: The Last Avenger, that was Brooklyn Antiques. and the start of the famous road chase. I mean, there's a bit more done to the front of it, so it's not as recognisable from Captain America. But if you look at the pictures and the stills, you can see number 58 there. It's definitely the same building. In fact, when I watched Captain America the other day, that road chase, I'm pretty certain they come down Dale Street at least twice. So I'm sure now you agree that Manchester and New York do look remarkably alike. The question is how and why. Now, I'd love to tell you that Manchester being the first industrial city means that New York were obviously copying us. However, I couldn't find any actual evidence for that, no matter how hard I tried. But actually, the story's probably even a little bit more interesting. And the more I looked into it, the more I couldn't help but feel that Manchester and New York mirror each other in a lot of ways, and it's not just in their architecture. So I can't say Manchester and New York were copying each other, but what was happening after the Industrial Revolution was Manchester and New York, well, for Manchester and New York, business was booming, and they needed properties, they needed space to carry out the trade, so they were building lots and lots of buildings, a bit like the one behind me here. And they weren't just throwing them up for space. Yeah, they didn't just want buildings that were functional, they want buildings that were making a statement. I always like to imagine a businessman coming over from New York and the owner of a building like that showing it off to him, showing how, trying to impress his colleagues or his business associates. If I'm being honest, if that was my building, I'd be showing it off as well. So into the 20th century, business started to cool. Other places caught up and provided competition, and also there was 2 world wars. So by the middle of the 20th century, a lot of these warehouses were disused. But obviously the buildings didn't disappear. They became cheap, affordable accommodation, and they attracted artists and musicians. Actually, a musician maybe like the one I can see just down here. I just noticed this to the side here. And there we have a mural for a famous Manchester musician. No prizes for guessing who he is. Comments in the description, please. Yeah, so back then, these lofts became some of the cheapest places you could find. And so the musicians and artists came from far and wide to live here. And I think that's why there's an argument that even though neither of these cities are their country's capitals, an argument can be made to say that these cities are their country's coolest. I remember when I moved to Somerset, the first thing people used to do when they heard my accent was start talking about the favourite Manchester bands. We had Joy Division, Stone Roses, The Smiths, and more recently Oasis. So New York has Soho, Manchester has the Northern Quarter. And of course, them loft apartments now will cost you a small fortune. So what do you think? Are New York and Manchester the country's coolest cities? Or am I just being biased? I've never been to New York myself, I would love to go. If you're watching this and you've been to both cities, please let me know if the vibe's similar when you're actually in the city, or is it just on paper that they both seem similar. But for now, I mean, anyway, for me, it's easier on the wallet. Manchester's easier on the wallet, and I don't need to bring my passport. But for now, I'm going to end it there. If you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate a like and maybe a subscription. And hope to come back next time. But for now, I'm going to go and get some gabagool. See you next time. Bye bye.